The circuit preacher's voice faltered mid-blessing as hoofbeats drummed across the Montana grassland. Lily Bennett kept her eyes on Thomas Whitlock's weathered face, but her spine stiffened. She knew that rhythm, that particular cadence of Wyatt Cole's prize stallion. Spring sunshine warmed the small gathering outside Thomas's cabin. 6 neighbors stood witness, their Sunday clothes worn but clean. Behind the couple, lamplight spilled from the open cabin door despite the morning brightness, casting warmth across the threshold. Wyatt reined in 20 feet away. The stallion snorted, muscles gleaming under fine leather tack that cost more than Thomas's entire claim. Lily's father sat tall in the saddle, silver conchos catching sunlight, his face carved from granite. Lily, not daughter, just her name, flat and cold. She turned slowly, Thomas's hand steady in hers. Papa. The preacher cleared his throat. Mr. Cole, we're in the middle of, I can see what you're in the middle of. Wyatt's gaze swept over Thomas's mended shirt, his clean but humble coat, the 40 acres of rocky ground stretching behind them. I came to give my daughter one last chance to remember who she is. I know exactly who I am, Lily said quietly. Wyatt's jaw tightened. He looked at Thomas for the first time, sizing him up like cattle at auction. You have nothing. 40 acres, 3 homesteaders already quit. A cabin that'll barely stand through winter. You can't provide for her. Thomas met his eyes without flinching. I can provide honest work and partnership. Sir, that'll have to be enough. Enough. Wyatt's laugh was bitter. She was raised for better than breaking her back on failed ground. Lily stepped forward, still holding Thomas's hand. I was raised by a man who taught me that hard work has dignity. That determination matters more than inheritance. Or did you forget your own lessons? Papa. Something flickered across Wyatt's face. Pain. Perhaps, or recognition, but pride smothered it. If you marry this man, you're choosing poverty over family, he said. You'll not set foot on Cole Ranch again. Your name comes off the deed, out of my will. I'll have no daughter. The words fell like stones into still water. Ripples of shock spread through the small gathering. Lily felt them, but she didn't waver. I choose love, she said, her voice carrying clear across the morning air. That's family enough. Wyatt's knuckles whitened on the reins. For a long moment, father and daughter held each other's gaze. Then he wheeled the stallion around and spurred away, leaving only dust and silence. The preacher shifted his weight. Miss Bennett, are you... Mrs. Whitlock, Lily corrected gently. She turned back to Thomas, whose hand had never loosened its hold on hers. Never been more certain of anything. The blessing resumed. Lily spoke her vows clearly, though tears wet her cheeks. Thomas's voice was steady as bedrock. When the preacher pronounced them married, the neighbors offered quiet congratulations, awkward in the wake of Wyatt's cold departure, as the small group dispersed. Lily stood watching the horizon where her father had disappeared. Thomas came up beside her, not speaking, just present. He'll come around, she whispered. Maybe, maybe not. Thomas touched her shoulder gently. Either way, we've got work to do, and each other. She turned toward the open cabin door, toward lamplight and new beginning. Toward the life she'd chosen with eyes wide open. Morning light revealed truth the way dawn exposes every rock and rut in rough country. Lily stood beside Thomas at the edge of their 40 acres, seeing the land without wedding day optimism to soften it. 3 homesteaders tried this ground before me, Thomas said. All quit inside 2 years. Stones jutted from thin soil like bones through skin. Sage and stubborn grass scattered across the acreage in patches. The creek ran strong now with spring melt, but the banks showed how low it dropped come summer. Why'd they fail? Lily asked. Tried to fight the land instead of learning from it. Thomas walked forward, boots crunching over rocky ground. See these stones. Previous fellows cursed them. I'm using them. He showed her the fence line he'd started. Stones cleared from the fields, stacked with careful precision. 2 years of solitary work evident in every weathered rock. And water. Lily knelt by the creek, trailing her fingers through the cold current. Thomas pulled a worn notebook from his pocket, pages soft from handling. Sketches covered the paper. Channels and measurements, calculations in careful script. Irrigation. If we can't count on rain, we bring water to the crops ourselves. Lily studied the drawings. Her father had taught her to read land for grazing, water sources for cattle, grass quality for feed. But this was different. This was about coaxing life from unwilling ground through sheer determination. How long will it take? She asked. Digging all these channels, 2, maybe 3 years to complete the system. But we start this month. Every day we dig, we're closer to security. Lily stood, brushing dirt from her skirt. Her wedding dress hung in the cabin now, carefully stored. Today she wore work clothes, ready for what came next. Then we better start. Thomas handed her a shovel. The handle was smooth from use, shaped to his grip. She took it, feeling the weight. Hard ground makes for strong roots, he said. My father taught me that. Plants that grow easy die first when trouble comes. But the ones that fight for every inch, they survive anything. Lily looked across their claim again, not with her father's eyes, measuring what it lacked, but with partnership eyes, seeing what it could become. Where do we start? Here. Thomas marked a spot with his boot. First channel runs from the creek to that south section. We'll plant there come May. They drove their shovels into rocky Montana soil. The blades hit stone, rang clear in the morning air. Lily felt the jolt up through her shoulders, the resistance of earth that didn't want to yield. She smiled and struck again. By midday, they'd cleared 3 feet of channel. Shallow but started. Lily's palms stung despite her gloves. Sweat dampened her collar. But the satisfaction of visible progress warmed her more than spring sunshine. Thomas showed her how to read the water, where it wanted to flow, how to work with natural slope instead of against it. She learned fast, asking questions, absorbing knowledge. You're a natural, he said, pausing to wipe his brow. I'm motivated. Lily leaned on her shovel. My father thinks we'll fail. I intend to prove him wrong. We're not doing this to prove anything to him. No, we're doing it to build something real. She looked at Thomas, at the honest dirt on his face, the strength in his frame tempered by gentleness. But proving him wrong will be satisfying anyway. Thomas laughed, the sound warm and free. Can't argue with that. They worked until sunset painted the sky gold and pink. The channel stretched longer now, rough but functional. Tomorrow they'd dig further, and the day after, every day until the system was complete. Walking back to the cabin, muscles aching but spirits high, Lily realized she was already thinking in partnership terms. Not my land or his claim, but our ground, our work, our future. It felt right as rain. The messenger arrived 3 weeks into their marriage. While Lily worked the garden plot beside the cabin, she recognized the Cole Ranch brand on the horse before the rider spoke. Delivery for Mrs. Whitlock, the young man said, clearly uncomfortable. He'd known her as Miss Bennett, the boss's daughter. Now she was barefoot in dirt, hands muddy from planting. She took the envelope without comment. The boy rode off quickly, relieved to escape the awkward moment. Thomas came around the cabin, saw her holding the thick paper. Your father, official, by the weight of it. Lily stared at the wax seal. For a moment she was 12 again, watching her mother's coffin lowered into ground. Wyatt had stood like stone that day, refusing tears. Lily had learned to match his stoicism, burying grief under responsibility. She'd become his shadow after that, learning ranch management at his side, riding fence lines, checking cattle, studying weather signs. He'd taught her everything except how to be her own person instead of his extension. Until Thomas. She'd met him at a summer dance in town. While wealthy ranchers' sons postured and bragged, Thomas had simply asked her to dance, then listened when she talked. Really listened. Asked about her thoughts, not her father's landholdings. 3 months of stolen conversations, 6 months of careful courtship, a year of knowing he was different from every man her father had chosen for her. Now this. Lily broke the seal and read. Legal language, but the meaning cut clear: disinherited. Name removed from all Cole Ranch documents. Forbidden to return unless she left Thomas Whitlock. The offer stood open. Come back alone. Be restored. Thomas watched her face. What does it say? That I chose wrong. She folded the letter precisely. That poverty and stubbornness aren't worth losing my inheritance. Is he right? Lily looked at him sharply, but saw only honest question in his eyes. No insecurity, no demand, just giving her space to doubt if doubt existed. No. She walked to the cabin, Thomas following. Inside. She opened the cook stove and fed the letter to the flames. Paper curled and blackened, expensive ink turning to ash. She collected the ashes carefully in a tin cup, then walked back outside to the garden plot. Thomas had marked it out, but they hadn't planted yet. Lily knelt and used her father's ashes to outline the first bed. Beans here, she said. They'll fix nitrogen in the soil, and tomatoes along the south side where they'll get full sun. Thomas knelt beside her. Lily, I'm all right. She smoothed the ash line with her finger. My mother told me something before she died. I was young. Didn't understand it then. But I do now. What did she say? Strong marriages aren't built in easy times. Lily looked up at gathering clouds. She said that people who only love each other when life's comfortable don't really know love at all. Thunder rumbled distant across the prairie. Spring rain coming, the kind that soaked deep and nourished seeds. My father gave me many things, Lily continued, but he never gave me partnership. He gave me position, inheritance, security, not equality. Thomas took her hand, the one still smudged with ash. We're planting more than crops here. I know. She squeezed his fingers. We're planting a different kind of life. One where I'm partner, not property. The first raindrops fell, fat and cold. They should have run for the cabin, but neither moved. Rain increased, soaking through their clothes, turning the ash to dark streaks in the soil. Lily tilted her face to the sky and laughed. The sound surprised her. Bubbling up from somewhere, grief and duty had kept locked. Thomas laughed too, and they stayed there in the downpour, kneeling in mud and possibility. When they finally went inside, dripping and shivering, Thomas built up the fire while Lily changed into dry clothes. She hung her wet things by the stove and saw him watching her with something like wonder. What? She asked. You're happy. I am. The realization settled warm in her chest. For the first time in years, I'm exactly where I choose to be. Outside. Rain drummed steady on their roof. Inside. Lamplight glowed and the fire crackled. They had 40 acres of stubborn ground, impossible dreams, and each other. It was enough. More than enough. Summer heat baked the Montana grassland until even sage smelled scorched. Lily learned the rhythm of farming life up before dawn. Work until midday, heat-forced rest. Back to labor when afternoon shadows lengthened. Thomas dug irrigation channels with patient determination. Lily planted, weeded, hauled water. Their first crop emerged fragile but real green shoots pushing through rocky soil like small miracles. By August, their hands matched calloused, dirt-rimmed, strong. Lily's skin bronzed despite her bonnet. Her muscles ached in new places, built new strength. She'd never worked this hard on her father's ranch, never felt this bone-deep satisfaction. September brought harvest, modest, but theirs. Potatoes, beans, squash, enough to store for winter with surplus to trade. Thomas loaded the wagon while Lily changed into town clothes, preparing for the ritual of commerce. The general store fell quiet when they entered. Mr. Patterson looked up from his ledger, surprise flickering across his weathered face. Behind the counter, his wife whispered to another woman. "Mrs. Whitlock," Patterson said carefully, "what can I do for you?" Lily set her basket on the counter. Fresh eggs, early vegetables, a jar of preserves. Trade for winter supplies, flour, salt, coffee. I have the list. She'd written it the night before. Calculated values, determined fair exchange. Patterson examined the goods, named prices that matched market rate, no pity discount, no spite inflation. Just business. Margaret Harrison stood by the fabric display, a woman who'd once invited Lily to tea socials, who'd discussed art and literature in cushioned parlors. Now she studied buttons with intense fascination, refusing to acknowledge Lily's presence. Another former friend, Elizabeth Porter, whispered loud enough to carry, "Such a waste. She could have married the Morton boy." Lily's spine straightened, but she kept her eyes on Patterson's careful measuring of flour. Thomas's hand found the small of her back. Steady pressure, not possessive, just present. "Will that do?" Patterson asked, indicating the supplies he'd assembled. "Fair trade." Lily agreed. She began loading items into her basket while Thomas carried the heavy sacks. "Mrs. Whitlock," Patterson said quietly, "for what it's worth, you've got grit, more than most." The words landed unexpected and warm. Lily met his eyes and saw respect there, genuine and unqualified. "Thank you, Mr. Patterson." Outside loading the wagon, Thomas asked, "You all right?" "Better than I expected." Lily settled the basket carefully. "I thought it would hurt more, being invisible to people who used to know me." "You're not invisible to everyone." She looked back through the store window. Patterson was arguing with his wife, gesturing firmly, standing up for them, perhaps, or just tired of gossip. They drove home in comfortable silence. Grasslands stretched wide under endless sky, mountains purple with distance. The cabin appeared small against all that space, but smoke curled from its chimney. Lily's garden showed green beside it. Thomas's irrigation channels cut purposeful lines through their fields. That evening they sat by lamplight, Thomas sketching expansions to the irrigation system while Lily mended his work shirt. The tear was from barbed wire, caught while fencing. She'd learned to repair such damage, her stitches getting neater with practice. "Next season we'll double our planting," Thomas said. "These channels will support it." "Where did you learn irrigation?" Lily asked. "Most homesteaders just pray for rain. My father worked a ranch down in Colorado. Before the fever took him, they had Mexican workers, men who knew desert farming. I watched, learned, asked questions." He added detail to his sketch. "Rich men think water comes easy because they've always had enough. But water's like respect, you earn it through preparation." Lily knotted her thread, examining her repair work. "My father has 4 wells on Cole Ranch. Never worries about drought. Except this year." Thomas looked up. "You hear about the water table dropping, old wells running low?" She hadn't cut off from ranch business. She'd lost access to that information. "How bad? Bad enough he's moving cattle early to high pasture. Heard it from Patterson." Thomas returned to his drawing. Weather's changing, patterns shifting. Men who can't adapt will struggle. Lily thought of her father, proud and certain, trusting methods that had worked for 30 years, refusing to imagine they might fail. "We're building something he'll notice," she said softly. "We're building something we need," Thomas corrected, "whether he notices or not." But Lily caught the slight smile on his face, the quiet satisfaction in his voice. He was proud of their work, justly so. And yes, proving Wyatt wrong would taste sweet when harvest came. First snow fell in late November, light and fleeting. They'd stored enough supplies to winter comfortably. The cabin was tight, well chinked, warm. Lily had sewn curtains from trade fabric, made their space into home. On long winter evenings, Thomas taught her to read his engineering notebooks, explaining slope calculations and water flow. Lily shared her father's wisdom about weather signs, animal behavior, the language of wind and cloud. They were building partnership in ways neither had known to name. Not romance soft and easy, but something deeper. Foundation solid as stone fence, reliable as irrigation channel, growing strong through shared purpose. Spring would test them again, but for now, wrapped in firelight and conversation, they rested in what they'd already built. Spring 1888 arrived fierce and muddy. Snowmelt swelled the creek, and Thomas attacked the second phase of his irrigation plan with renewed energy. This year's channels would be longer, deeper, more complex. Lily worked beside him, learning to read grade and flow like second language. Her shoulders broadened with the labor. Her hands grew tougher still. "Why 40 acres?" she asked one morning, both of them waist-deep in a trench. "Why not file for more?" Thomas paused, leaning on his shovel. "Because I can work 40 acres right. 100 acres worked wrong is just wasted ground." "My father would say you lack ambition. Your father measures success in acres owned. I measure it in crops grown." He resumed digging. Different mathematics. They worked in comfortable rhythm, speaking little, understanding much. Lily had never imagined marriage could be this labor shared, silence unforced, presence enough without constant words. But as weeks passed, she noticed Thomas growing quieter than usual. Something weighed on him, pressed down between his shoulders like physical burden. One evening, after a particularly hard day, she poured coffee and waited. Sometimes silence invited confession better than questions. Finally, he spoke. "I worry I ask too much of you." Lily looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" "This life." He gestured around their modest cabin. "Hard work, no certainty. People in town treating you like you fell from grace." His voice roughened. "You could have had ease, Lily, comfort, position. I have partnership." She said, "I have purpose. I have a husband who sees me as equal, not ornament." She set down her coffee. "Do you think I'm unhappy? I think you're tired. I see you wince when you think I'm not looking. Sore from work your body wasn't raised to do." Lily crossed to him, took his face in her work-roughened hands. "My body is learning what it should have known all along. That satisfaction comes from building, not inheriting." Thomas's eyes searched hers. "You miss him, though." "Your father." The truth settled heavy and honest between them. "I do. Every day." Her voice cracked slightly. "I miss who I thought he was. The man who taught me to read weather, to value hard work, to stand on principle." She released him, stepped back. "I don't miss the man who values pride over love." "Maybe he'll change." "Maybe." Lily returned to her chair. "My aunt sent a letter last week. Said he's aged since I left. Doesn't smile anymore. Works himself until dark every day." "Sounds familiar," Thomas said quietly. "Except we work ourselves happy. He's working himself bitter." She picked up her coffee again, needing something to hold. I wrote back. Told her we're well. The land's improving. We're building something worthwhile. She paused. Asked her to tell him that. If he'd listen. Will he? No. The word landed flat but certain. Wyatt Cole doesn't listen. He judges, decides, enforces, but he doesn't listen. Thomas came to kneel beside her chair. I lost my parents to fever when I was 16. Watched them die within 3 days of each other. His voice held old pain, worn smooth by years but never erased. I worked other men's land for 8 years after that, saved every penny. Watched wealthy ranchers waste good ground because they didn't have to care. Inheritance guaranteed their comfort. Lily stroked his hair. Listening. I vowed when I got my own claim. I'd prove that determination matters more than birthright. That a man's worth shows in what he builds, not what he inherits. He looked up at her. Then I met you, and I realized I needed to prove that not just to the world, but to myself. You've proved it, Lily said softly. Not yet. Not until we bring in harvest that feeds us through winter and leaves surplus for others. Not until this ground blooms green when others withers. He took her hand. But we're close. Another year, maybe two, and we'll have security nobody can question. Lily pulled him up, into embrace that felt like homecoming. They stood there, holding each other against doubt and weariness and all the hard miles yet to travel. Thomas, she whispered against his shoulder. Thank you. For what? For being exactly who you are, not who anyone expected you to be. He kissed her forehead, gentle and reverent. Same to you, Lily Whitlock. That night she lay awake while he slept, listening to spring wind test their cabin walls, thinking about foundations, about roots driving deep through rocky soil, about partnerships that strengthened through adversity. Her father had given her everything but freedom. Thomas had given her nothing but choice. She knew which gift held real value. Outside, the creek ran high with snowmelt. Tomorrow they'd dig more channels, plant more seeds, build more future. But tonight she rested in what they'd already created, home forged from shared vision, marriage tempered by honest labor, love that grew stronger by asking hard questions and answering them together. Strong roots, she thought, drifting towards sleep. Strong roots survive anything. Summer 1889 announced itself with absence. By mid-June, rain should have fallen steady twice a week. Instead, the sky stretched blue and merciless, day after day. Lily watched the creek level drop. Not dramatic yet, but visible. A foot lower than last year, then 2 feet, then 3. In town, conversations turned anxious. Farmers compared rain gauges, finding the same grim story. Ranchers discussed moving cattle early to high pastures where streams still ran strong. The town meeting in July drew everyone. Lily and Thomas sat in the back of the church, feeling eyes on them. They were no longer novelty. But they weren't quite accepted either. Outsiders by Lily's choice. Respected reluctantly for their survival. Mr. Patterson stood at the front, grave-faced. The drought's real, folks. Weather charts show this pattern every 5 years or so. But we haven't seen it this bad in a generation. He unfurled graphs, measurements, predictions. Lily understood them instantly. Her father's training served her still. The numbers told a story of crop failure, economic hardship, possible exodus. My wheat's already turning brown, one farmer called out. Lost maybe half my expected yield. Corn's struggling. Another added, even with all the rain barrels I filled in spring. Around the room, voices rose in worried consensus. Families considered leaving, abandoning claims, seeking opportunity elsewhere. The desperation felt thick as humidity. Thomas sat quiet through it all, listening, calculating. Lily knew that look. His mind worked the problem like water through channels, finding paths others missed. Walking home afterward, she asked, "How bad for us?" "Bad, but not impossible." He looked toward their land, hidden beyond the ridge. The creek's lower, but it's still running. And we've got 3 times the channel capacity we had last year. Will it be enough? We'll know at harvest. Back at their claim. Thomas worked the irrigation system obsessively. Every morning before dawn, every evening past dark. Lily rationed household water, using every drop twice. Laundry water fed the garden. Cooking water soaked the vegetable plot. Nothing wasted. Their neighbors watched with mixed emotions. Some admired the preparation. Others found it prideful. As if Thomas thought he could outsmart God's weather. Old man Garrett rode past one afternoon, stopped to watch Thomas digging yet another connecting channel. "You're trying to fight the Lord's will with a shovel." "Boy." Thomas kept working. Didn't look up. Just using what the Lord gave me. Ground, water, strength. Seems wasteful not to try. Seems prideful to think you know better than nature. Nature taught me to prepare for hardship. That's not pride. Sir, that's wisdom. Garrett spat tobacco juice and rode on, shaking his head. Lily came out with water for Thomas, watched him drink deep and return immediately to work. You can't dig every hour of daylight. Watch me. But she saw the fear driving him. Fear of failure, of proving Garrett right, of letting Lily down. She understood it because she felt it too. They'd gambled everything on this dream. Drought threatened to call their bluff. August arrived with heat that shimmered visible off the ground, across the region. Crops withered. In town, families loaded wagons and left, unable to face a winter with no harvest. The exodus felt like surrender, like nature winning some cruel contest. But Thomas's irrigation held. Their fields showed green where others turned brown. Not lush, not abundant, but alive. Stubbornly, defiantly alive. One evening, Lily stood at their field's edge, surveying the contrast. Behind her, their crops struggled but survived. Beyond the fence line, the neighbor's abandoned claim showed nothing but dust and dead stalks. Thomas came up beside her, both of them exhausted beyond words. What if it's not enough? She whispered. What if we pour everything into this and still fail? Then we tried our best. He took her hand. That's all any person can do. She leaned against him, drawing strength from his solid presence. My father's fields are withering too. I heard it from Mrs. Patterson. Even Cole Ranch feels the drought. Thomas nodded slowly. Money can't buy rain. Power can't command clouds. Everybody's equal when nature decides to humble us. Lily thought of her father, probably standing in his own dying fields, proud and alone. Did he think of her, wonder how she fared, or did pride still block any thought of reconciliation? Whatever comes, Thomas said quietly. We face it together, not failure, not defeat. Just the next challenge in a long line of them. She turned to kiss him, brief and fierce. Together. She agreed. That night, lying awake while Thomas finally slept, Lily prayed for rain. Not just for them, but for everyone. For her father, stubborn and hurting. For their neighbors, struggling and afraid. For the land itself, suffering under relentless sun. But morning brought only more blue sky, more heat, more slow withering. They worked the channels, rationed the water, tended the crops with desperate care, and waited for autumn to reveal whether their gamble had paid off or merely delayed the inevitable. Late August pressed down like a physical weight. Heat waves shimmered off earth too dry to absorb sweat. Even the creek, their lifeline, ran dangerously low. Lily woke before dawn and knew immediately something was wrong. Thomas's side of the bed was cold. She found him outside, staring at the creek by lantern light. It dropped another foot overnight, he said without turning. We need to make a choice. Lily knew what he meant without asking. Water the crops or save household supply for drinking, cooking, cleaning if the harvest failed. Gamble everything on success, or hedge against disaster. She stood beside him, watching weak current barely cover stones that should have been submerged. How many days can we water the crops before it's too late to pull back? 4, maybe 5. His voice was hollow with exhaustion. After that, we're committed. They stood in pre-dawn darkness, their future balanced on a knife edge. Lily thought of everything they'd invested, 2 years of backbreaking labor, social exile, burned bridges with her father, every penny and hope and dream. Thomas, she said quietly, I need to tell you something. He finally looked at her. I'm scared, she admitted, terrified. Actually, not of failing, but of dragging you down with me. If I hadn't chosen you, you wouldn't be carrying this weight. You'd be just another homesteader struggling through drought. Not trying to prove something to a proud old man who won't even acknowledge our existence. Thomas took her shoulders gently. Lily Whitlock, listen to me. You didn't drag me anywhere. I chose this fight long before I met you. The day I filed this claim, I declared war on every assumption about wealth and worth. His hands tightened slightly. You just gave me something worth fighting for beyond pride. Tears she'd been holding broke free. What if we lose everything? Then we lose it together. He pulled her close. But we're not losing yet. We're tired. We're scared. But we're still standing. She cried against his chest, releasing fear and tension held too long. He held her, steady as bedrock, until the storm passed, when she pulled back, wiping her eyes. Dawn was breaking pink and gold, beautiful and terrible in its cloudless perfection. My mother told me something, Lily said, voice rough. Before she died, I was 12. Didn't understand it then. What did she say? Strong marriages aren't built in easy times. Lily looked at their struggling fields, their dropping creek, the enormity of the gamble before them. They're built in moments like this, when you choose each other even when it costs everything. Thomas cupped her face. What do you want to do? Water the crops, she said firmly. Trust our preparation. We've worked too hard to quit now. Could still fail. Could still succeed. She managed a small smile. And either way, we'll know we gave it everything. They worked that day with renewed purpose, directing every possible drop to the most crucial crops. Lily's body screamed protest muscles pushed past endurance, skin burned and cracked, but she kept going. Late afternoon, a wagon appeared on the horizon. The Hendersons, their nearest neighbors, struggling homesteaders with 3 young children. Mr. Henderson climbed down slowly, hat in hands. Mrs. Whitlock, Mr. Whitlock, our well ran dry this morning. The children stared from the wagon bed, faces streaked with dust and fear. The youngest was maybe 5, clutching a rag doll. Lily looked at Thomas. They had so little margin already, but the choice was obvious, had always been obvious. Come on, Thomas said. We'll fill your barrels. They used precious household water, knowing it left them even more vulnerable. Henderson tried to protest, but Thomas wouldn't hear it. A man's worth ain't measured by his acres, Thomas said, filling the last barrel. But by what he grows on them, and I don't just mean crops. Henderson's eyes reddened. We're leaving tomorrow, headed to my brother's place in Oregon. Can't make it through winter here. He paused. I'm sorry to see us quit. You're not quitting, Lily said gently. You're making the right choice for your family. That takes courage, too. After they left. Lily and Thomas stood watching dust settle on the empty road. They'd just given away water that might mean the difference between survival and ruin. We're fools, Thomas said, the best kind. Lily agreed. That night, bone-weary and heart-sore, they lay in bed unable to sleep. Too hot, too worried, too aware of impossible stakes. Tell me about your father, Thomas said into the darkness. Before everything went wrong, Lily thought back across the chasm of estrangement. He taught me to ride when I was 4, took me on roundups when other fathers left daughters home, showed me how to read clouds, predict weather, understand cattle. Her voice softened. He trusted me with responsibility most men reserved for sons. He loved you. In his way. But his way included deciding my future without asking what I wanted. She rolled toward Thomas. Funny thing is, all those lessons he taught me about determination, about preparation, about not taking anything for granted, we're using them now. Against his expectations. But using them. Maybe that's what hurts him most. Seeing his own wisdom succeed in ways he didn't authorize. Lily had never thought of it that way. But Thomas was right. Wyatt had raised her strong, smart, capable. Then couldn't accept when she used that strength to choose her own path. "Whatever happens," she whispered, "I don't regret choosing you. Even if we fail. Especially if we fail. Because failing together means more than easy success ever could." They fell asleep holding hands, two people betting everything on partnership and perseverance. Waiting for September to prove them fools or prophets. Morning would bring more heat, more work, more slow march toward reckoning. But tonight they rested in each other, gathering strength for whatever came next. September arrived like mercy. The heat broke slightly. Mornings showing first hint of autumn chill. Time for harvest, ready or not. Lily and Thomas walked their fields at dawn, assessing what they'd grown against impossible odds. The crop wasn't abundant, but it was real. Solid. Green where the entire region had turned brown. "We did it," Lily breathed. Thomas shook his head slowly, wonder in his eyes. "We actually did it." But they began harvesting immediately, working dawn to dusk, racing to bring in their survival before weather could turn. Potatoes, beans, squash, grain, not enough to sell for profit, but enough to feed them through winter with surplus to share. 3 days into harvest, Lily straightened from her work, easing her aching back. Movement on the ridge caught her eye. A lone rider, silhouetted against morning sun. Her breath stopped. She knew that silhouette, that particular way of sitting a horse. "Thomas," she said quietly. He looked up, followed her gaze. "Is that—" "Papa." Wyatt Cole rode down slowly, taking in everything. His eyes swept the irrigation channels, monuments to backbreaking labor. The stone fences built from rocks others had cursed. The modest cabin made home through love and care. And the fields, the green, growing, thriving fields standing proud while his own withered. He reined in at the field's edge, dismounted slowly, like a man whose bones ached. He looked older than Lily remembered, thinner, weathered by more than sun. They stood frozen, 10 feet apart, 2 years of silence heavy between them. "Papa," Lily said, just that. No explanation, no accusation, just acknowledgement. Wyatt's gaze moved from her to Thomas, studying the man his daughter had chosen, taking in Thomas's calloused hands, his work-worn clothes, the quiet strength in his stance. "I came to see you fail," Wyatt said finally, voice rough. "Rode past your land expecting to find it dead like everything else in the county, expecting to convince you to come home." Lily waited, heart hammering. "But you didn't fail." Wyatt looked at the irrigation channels again, really seeing them. "How far planning?" Thomas said simply, 3 years of work before the drought hit. Channels dug by hand. Every drop of water channeled and conserved. "My fields are dead," Wyatt said. Cole Ranch, 30 years of success, brought low by one dry summer. He laughed bitterly. While 40 acres of rock and determination produced harvest, "I'm sorry about your fields," Lily said, and meant it. Wyatt's eyes found hers. She saw pain there, deep and honest. "Are you after what I said? After how I treated you? You're my father. Your pain is mine, whether you claim me or not." Something broke in Wyatt's face. The pride, the certainty, the rigid assumptions, they cracked like drought-dried earth, revealing softer ground beneath. "I was wrong," he said. The words clearly cost him everything. "About this man, about your choice, about what makes a person worthy." He gestured at their fields. "I measured worth in acres owned, cattle counted, money banked. But worth shows here." He looked at Thomas. "In work done, in preparation made, in partnership built." Thomas extended his hand. "Sir." Wyatt took it, felt the calluses, the strength earned through labor. His own hands were soft in comparison, managers' hands that directed others' work. "Can you forgive a stubborn old man?" Wyatt asked Lily, voice breaking. "Can you let me be part of what you've built here?" Lily crossed the space between them and embraced her. "Father," he held her tight. This man who'd raised her rejected her, and finally found humility enough to admit his error. "I've missed you," she whispered. "Every single day. I've missed you too, daughter." He pulled back to look at her. "You're sunburned, work-worn, and more beautiful than I've ever seen you." She laughed through tears. "Because I'm happy. Papa, truly happy." Wyatt turned to Thomas. "I owe you an apology, too. You've done what I failed to do, prepared for hardship instead of assuming prosperity would last forever." "No apology needed," Thomas said. "But we could use another pair of hands finishing this harvest." "If you're willing." Wyatt looked startled, then grateful. "I'd be honored." They worked together that day. 3 people united by reconciliation and shared purpose. Wyatt learned to follow Thomas's lead, to take instruction from the man he'd once dismissed. Lily watched her father bend his pride, saw him truly see Thomas's worth. At day's end, standing in their field as shadows lengthened, Wyatt said quietly, "This harvest will feed how many of us through winter?" Thomas answered, "With enough surplus for the Pattersons and old widow Morrison? 3 families. 4, if you need it." Wyatt's jaw worked. "My pride cost me 2 years with my daughter, watching her build something real while I clung to assumptions that don't hold water anymore." He looked at Lily, literally and figuratively. "Pride's a poor crop," Thomas said gently. "Won't feed you come winter," Wyatt laughed, the sound rusty but genuine. "No. But humility might plant something worth harvesting." The 3 of them walked toward the cabin as evening fell. Lamplight already glowed through windows. Inside waited warmth. Food. Rest earned through honest labor. Together. Finally. Impossibly. Together. Harvest took another week with 3 pairs of hands instead of 2. Wyatt worked with quiet determination, learning from Thomas, supporting Lily. Slowly rebuilding bridges his pride had burned. The yield exceeded their cautious hopes. Enough stored for winter with genuine surplus. Thomas loaded the wagon one October morning, Lily beside him, Wyatt following on his stallion. In town, word had spread. The Whitlocks brought in harvest when nearly everyone else had failed. People emerged from shops and homes to see the proof. Patterson came out from behind his counter, examined the potatoes and grain with expert eye. "Finest crop in the county this year," he said loudly enough for gathered crowd to hear. "Maybe the only crop worth mentioning." Wyatt dismounted, walked to stand beside his daughter publicly for the first time in 2 years. "My son-in-law," he said clearly, "has proven that intelligence and preparation matter more than inheritance." I was wrong to doubt him, wrong to turn my back on my daughter for choosing well. The admission rippled through the watching townspeople. Margaret Harrison, who'd avoided Lily for months, stepped forward hesitantly. "Mrs. Whitlock," she said, "I owe you an apology for my rudeness. You showed more courage than any of us." Others followed, offering respect earned through perseverance. The social exile lifted like morning fog under sun, but the real victory waited at home. The 3 of them sat around the cabin table that evening, sharing a meal Lily had cooked from their own harvest. Simple food that tasted like triumph. "Next season," Wyatt said, "I'd like to help expand your irrigation system, if you'll teach me." Thomas nodded. "We could use the help. And the company." "I've been thinking," Wyatt continued. "Cole Ranch needs to modernize, prepare for climate uncertainty. I'd like to learn from what you've built here." "Not charity," Thomas clarified. "Partnership. Partnership." Wyatt agreed. True partnership, where wisdom flows both directions. Lily watched them plan, her husband and her father finding common ground in shared respect. She thought of her mother. Wished she could see this moment. See how suffering had refined them all. Burned away pride and assumption. Left something stronger. Later, walking the land as sunset painted everything gold, the three of them surveyed what had been built. Irrigation channels catching light, stone fences standing firm, fields harvested clean. Your mother would be proud, Wyatt said to Lily. Not of the crop, though that's impressive, but of you. Your strength, your certainty about what matters. She taught me well. Lily said, both of you did, in different ways. She taught you that strong roots survive any drought. Wyatt said quietly, I'd forgotten that lesson. Thought surface show mattered more than deep preparation. He looked at Thomas. You remembered it, applied it, succeeded where I failed. We each have our droughts. Thomas said, different kinds. Yours was pride. Mine was loneliness. Lily's was living someone else's vision instead of her own. He took her hand. But we all survived, found our way through to something better. Aye. They stood together as darkness gathered. Three shadows merging in the golden autumn light. Behind them, the cabin door stood open, warm lamplight spilling out, smoke curling from the chimney, home radiating peace and hard-won joy. I should head back, Wyatt said reluctantly. Ranch won't run itself. Stay, Lily said. Just tonight. We have room. Wyatt's eyes reddened. I'd like that, inside. Thomas added wood to the fire while Lily made up a pallet. Wyatt stood awkwardly, unused to humble quarters but determined to appreciate them. This cabin has more warmth than my big house, he admitted. More life in these four walls than in all my empty rooms. You're welcome any time, Thomas said. Truly. They talked late into the night, years of separation bridged by honest conversation. Wyatt told stories of Lily's mother, memories he'd locked away after her death. Lily shared their struggles and triumphs. Thomas spoke of his parents, his years of preparation, his dreams for the land. Finally, exhaustion claimed them. As Wyatt settled on his pallet and Thomas banked the fire, Lily stepped outside for one last look at the stars. The land stretched quiet under moonlight. Their fields, stripped clean by harvest, rested and waited for spring. The irrigation channels cut silver lines in the darkness, promise of future abundance. Thomas came out, wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. Cold. Just grateful. She leaned against him. For all of it, the hard parts and the good parts, the struggle that made us strong. Think he'll really change? Thomas asked quietly. He's trying. That's more than I dared hope for. Lily turned to face him. We proved something. Didn't we, not just to him, but to ourselves? That true wealth lies in partnership and perseverance, not inheritance. And that pride blinds us to the value of what we reject until humility opens our eyes. Lily added, he had to see it to believe it, had to witness our success with his own eyes. They stood there holding each other. Two people who'd gambled everything on love and partnership and won more than they'd dreamed possible. Inside, Lily's father slept in their humble home. Tomorrow they'd share breakfast, discuss future plans, begin building the relationship that pride had broken and humility restored. But tonight, under stars that had witnessed their struggle and survival, Lily and Thomas simply held each other, grateful for rocky ground that made strong roots, grateful for drought that proved their preparation, grateful for each other, for partnership that transformed impossible odds into harvest worth celebrating. The cabin door stood open behind them, lamplight fading as the fire burned low. They'd close it soon, seal warmth inside for the night. But for now they stood in the doorway between past and future, between struggle and rest, between what they'd overcome and what they'd built. Together, always together.